it's amazing what the Leafs can do without Austin Matthews and then the greatest player of all time, William Nylander. I was of the mindset that, look, you got to get something for this guy right now.
Mhm.
Maybe they just let him sit.
I can look back at sort of ancient history in terms of an example of this situation. And I know it's been mentioned and talked about, but Mike Pekka, when he was with the Sabres, and this was, around 99, 2000, after the Sabres had gotten to the Cup final, there was a holdout. It was a year-long holdout with Pekka. And when he came back the next year after sitting out the entire year, he says, I can't play for this club. And he was traded. And the return, I believe, was like Steve Bernier and Tim Connolly. They did not get the value back for Pekka that he was worth to the Sabres. And I think that in a similar vein, if Nylander sits out all year, he's going to play in the KHL. He could get hurt. There's no guarantee that he may not say, okay, well, I can play in Sweden or play in the KHL and not come back to the NHL. I mean, there's a lot of pitfalls with the just let him rot, let him sit situation. And I know that Pierre LeBrun came up with, and I didn't come up with something, but it is a possibility. After December 1st, he cannot play in the NHL because of the Pekka situation. It was changed in the CBA that there was a deadline. If it passes December 1st, his rights can still be traded, and the Leafs could trade his rights before the February 25th trade deadline. A team that's not a playoff team would probably not mind to trade for Nylander, even though he can't play for them, because they wouldn't want him to affect their record in terms of the pursuit of Jack Hughes or something like that. So, I mean, that's a possibility, but it's sort of a long shot. I think it comes down to, obviously one of three options. Either he signs a contract, he gets traded, or he sits. And I think sitting for the entire year is the lowest of the three probabilities. I think it's basically even in terms of trade and in terms of sign, but I lean more towards trade, not because I think the Leafs are, hankering to do it. I lean more towards trade because I just don't think Nylander's camp is going to be in a compromised position. I think they want what they want, and if they don't get it from the Leafs, they'll get it from somebody else. But I don't think they're going to all of a sudden say, let's make a deal.
We are speculating here. I wonder how much Louis Gross and the puppet master Michael Nylander are in the ear of Kyle Dubas, suggesting through statistics that I assume they would use to suggest that William Nylander is better than Mitch Marner. The holdup here is the expectation from Camp Nylander that their guy is going to end up making less money than someone they believe is inferior to William. And there's just no way to reconcile that. Mitch Marner is going to become this pariah. He's going to become this guy who a lot of fans get upset with because they'll believe that he is the reason that William Nylander is not making the money that he should be with the Maple Leafs and not continue his career with the Maple Leafs. In their minds, he is superior to Mitch Marner. Let's not make any mistake about this. This is about William Nylander versus Mitch Marner.
Well, yeah, yes, it is, but I think it's William Nylander versus William Nylander in a sense. It's like he has a record. He scored 60 points 2 years in a row. You have to use comparables based on what he has done in the NHL. And if you look at his comparables through the first 3 years of his ELC, you look at guys like Nick Ehlers and, to the higher end of the scale, David Pastrnak, and those players are making, between 6 and 6.6 million. So you would think that the compromise would be in that range. Well, Nylander is 5 years away from being an unrestricted free agent, and if he wants a 6 or 7 year deal, apparently still asking in the $7.5 to $8 million range, and that's just something that is not possible for the Leafs because they have to pay Marner and they have to pay Matthews. And other teams, I've heard the argument from people I respect on the radio, on TV, saying there's no way that the Leafs can win a Nylander deal because they're giving up the best player in the deal. But that's not the point in this deal. The point is to get what you don't have. And if the Leafs can get a top four defenseman and they can get another forward back for Nylander, I think it's a win, even though Nylander might be the better player in the deal. And like if it's Brett Pesce, if it's Colton Parayko, if it's Brandon Montour, Yeah, they're not as good as Nylander, but the Leafs have Tavares, have Matthews, have Marner, and they have enough offense. It's not a situation where, they're giving up this guy and they have nobody else that can score. That's the thing. The Leafs have plenty of players who can score. They just need more help in different areas.
When fans go on about William Nylander having to be on this team because he's statistically superior to Mitch Marner and just about everybody in the history of hockey.
Well,
No, hold on a sec. This is statistical. This is what the metrics tell them. So all these numbers are great. What happens when he walks into the locker room? What happens to the dynamic? What happens to the friendships and the things that are fractured? Like, these guys, they're young guys. If you think that there is no social element and there's no cohesion that is going to be challenged, you're nuts.
I'm not sure that the acrimony and the fitting back in is high on the list of the concerns of the Leafs. I think the numbers in terms of how they can fit all these players under the cap is the main concern. They know that they're facing a payday for Austin Matthews, and we know based on how he has played, even from the beginning of the season, but even more so since Matthews went down, how valuable Mitch Marner is. And, it may not be possible to get Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews on 8-year deals like I wrote a couple weeks ago. And it might be a situation where they sign one of them to a 5-year deal. And then once Tavares' contract is a year away from being expired, they can afford to extend a Marner or a Matthews for another 8 years or another long-term deal. There's moves to be made in terms of the cap situation that Pridham and Dubas will handle. What I just think is that the reality is that the Leafs are an effective offensive machine without William Nylander. They will be more effective with him, but they're effective enough without him. But we know that they need to improve on defense. And that's why if Kyle Dubas gets an offer in a trade that is beneficial and equal to the value of Nylander, I think he'll do it. If he gets lowballed, then I don't think Kyle Dubas will do it. Then the possibility of him sitting out throughout the rest of the year, if they can't come to a deal, comes to fruition. But I think if they get anything, if they get a deal close to equal value or more than equal value, he will not play another game as a Maple Leaf.
For the Leafs part, it's about making the dollars work because they have a grand plan. They have a master plan. The team's goal is to win the Stanley Cup. William Nylander's goal is to make as much money as he possibly can for himself. But he's got to think about the scenarios that are presented to him in the immediate and what he's going to mortgage or bet or bank on earning going forward, even if it risks losing out in the short term. What I am saying is that these guys are human beings. They are young. They're still in their formative professional years. If William Nylander was forced to take a deal through his agents, and is he the one making the call, or is it his father and his agent?
We don't know.
He didn't want to do it. And he comes back. Is he going to be the same player?
I believe, and this is a minority opinion, but I believe that the Maple Leafs are a better team with John Tavares and with what they can get for William Nylander in a fair trade, in a good trade, than John Tavares and William Nylander.
I believe the ship has sailed on William Nylander. It's just been too long. That's just the way it goes. And I know a lot of people are hoping that they sign him because they love him and they adore him and they love him. That's fine. We're also passionate. We care about what's going on. And where I'm at as a fan, I want to win the Stanley Cup. I don't care about William Nylander getting paid. And I don't care about his bravado or his ego being satisfied to give him the sense that he is superior to Mitch Marner because a couple of stats suggest that he is from last year. Win the Stanley Cup, and this is what the Maple Leafs have to do, is they have to take that asset and get as much back for that asset as they possibly can. And we talked about this, Mike. You have an abundance in one area. Doesn't seem as bad lately, but you still have to bolster up the defense. And if you can take William Nylander and do that and throw in Jake Gardiner in for a good measure because he's not signing here anyway, and even if he was a candidate to be signed, there's no reason to have him back here because he's a redundant kind of player.
There were two Leaf scouts in Philadelphia watching the Flyers Devils game, and the Flyers have been up and down recently. And if you look at their roster, they have an excess of defense. And last night they got shut out by the worst road team in the NHL, namely the New Jersey Devils. I know that I had been told previously that the Flyers might not be in on Nylander. I think if there are scouts there, there's still possibility that they're one of a number of teams. So I'm not saying it's a definite. I have no idea. Nobody has any idea of where he's going to go or if he's going to go. But I think Philadelphia is one of maybe 5 or 6 teams that you could see Nylander traded to, but it's hardly a guarantee.
William Nylander going somewhere else is going to haunt the Maple Leafs and a certain portion of the fan base for a long time. The Leafs could win 3 cups without him if he does something great, wins a scoring title, an Art Ross, Rocket Richard, scores a nice goal. It's going to haunt the Leafs. There are going to be those people who think that William Nylander is the greatest Maple Leaf of all time and needs to be paid accordingly. As I've said before, I love the Maple Leafs more than individual Leafs, and I think it's important in this day and age of idolizing players and pitting one player against the next on the same team, or disrespecting a certain portion of the same fan base that you're a part of because they don't believe in what you believe in. That the end goal for all of us should be to support a team in a way to have that team understand that the goal is not just to pay your favorite player, but to win the Stanley Cup.